Good morning, everyone. I guess I was the last to enter. I heard some conversation in progress, but I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for October 5th, 2021. Formally, although this is where I entered the conversation, I think it was already going on, but I want to welcome Ms. Heidi Consgrud and the grade 5-6 class to our session for at least the first half hour. Welcome all. It's great to have engagement at a very young age. Happy to have you here. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda before you. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Councillor Butler.
Thanks very much, Your Worship and Council. Good morning. Not really perhaps necessary to add an item to the agenda, but I just wanted to point out that on item 7.6, the speed limits issue, there were two motions that we dealt with and agreed to advance forward to council, but I think only one of them is referenced. So just something to consider when we get to that point on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anything else with respect to the agenda? Councillor Chernow.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning to everyone. I considered adding an item under in camera for the CAO review. It's just a brief information session. I'm not sure it has to be in camera, but it's preferred. So may I ask for that, please?
You may indeed.
Thank you very much.
I had intended in any event to raise it under new business, but it will ultimately have to go in camera anyway. So we could add then perhaps as 12A, a request for in-camera relative to CAO performance.
Thank you.
I will take that then as a motion from Councillor Chernow that we add agenda item 12A to today's agenda, that being an in-camera item related to CAO performance. I'll call the question. All in favor of that addition to the agenda? There are none opposed, and I would call then for a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Councillor McGrath, thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Councillor Butler, your hand is a little low for the camera this morning there. I see that one. Thank you very much. Councillors, the minutes of the regular meeting of September 21st, 2021 have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? Seeing nothing, I would ask for a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of September 21st, 2021 as presented. Councillor Keller-Harempy, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. Agenda item 4, presentations. There is nothing scheduled. Nothing has arisen. Mr. Given, thank you. Agenda item 5, business arising from previous minutes. Is there any business arising? I see nothing. We can move to agenda item 6, department reports. Again, there is nothing scheduled and nothing has arisen. Mr. Given is shaking me off, as a good catcher does. Thank you. So that takes us to the meat of the agenda. Agenda item 7, request for decision, and we can begin with the land acknowledgement policy. Mr. Given, can you lead us through that initially, or Ms. Riddell?
Sure. Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'll begin, and if necessary, Ms. Riddell can come in to cover some of the details. But Council is well aware of this. It was back in July where Council directed Municipal Administration to develop a land acknowledgement policy for review at a future Committee of the Whole meeting. And at our last Committee of the Whole meeting, Council had a chance to review that policy and suggest some changes, some amendments to the policy. So the policy is back here to Council for final review and consideration for approval. At a high level, the intent is to ensure that the municipality of Jasper is continuing down the path of reconciliation within our Indigenous peoples. And the policy sets out an approach for the municipality to regularly and formally make land acknowledgements. I'll just point out a few of the changes to the policy, again, because Council has already read this document. We did catch some typos. Thank you to the members of Council that pointed those out. And we also, in terms of the scope, there was a concern that we might have been a bit narrow in scope about limiting what types of speakers could choose to do a land acknowledgement policy. And so Council will see that we've made a change to delete a word there, which actually broadens the scope of who may choose to additionally do a land acknowledgement recognition after the first one in a meeting has been done. And we've also added a definition of public meeting. There was some discussion at the committee meeting of what actually is a meeting. And thankfully, the municipality has that definition already in our procedure bylaw, which defines a public meeting as meaning a meeting of Council or Committee of the Whole at which members of the public may attend and may be invited to make submission to Council, but which is not a public hearing. So there is a very specific definition of public meeting that already existed, and administration recommends that for consistency that's the definition that we would include in the policy. And then finally, there was a section around asking questions. We appreciated the advice from Council that the asking questions is a good approach, but maybe not appropriate in this policy, given the focus of the policy on land recognition. So, Your Worship, with that brief introduction, because Council has already seen this document a couple of times, I would turn it over to Council for discussion and debate and decision.
Thank you very much, Mr. Given. I will open the floor first to discussion and questions of administration, if there are any. If there are no questions for administration, then we could turn to a motion and debate as necessary. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and just wanting to take another opportunity to sincerely thank administration and Mrs. Riddell and the Inclusion Committee for all of the work that they've put forward on this. And it's an absolute pleasure to have this before us today, and I'm very happy for us as a municipality to have this here. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you for that, Councillor McGrath. Councillor DeMota.
Thank you. I wanted to say that, you know, I'm very impressed with the collaborative effort here, and you know, not only administration but fellow councillors who have been instrumental in wordsmithing and helping with the wordsmithing. Some strengths that some of us have and other of us don't. So I'm grateful to have the opportunity to have this before us in the manner it is, and I don't have any suggestions for any changes. So I'm looking forward to the motion.
Thank you, Councillor DeMota. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. If there are no other questions or comments from councillors to administration, I'd like to take an opportunity to make a motion that Council adopt the draft land acknowledgement policy for use by the municipality of Jasper, and that Council refer the matter of regular ongoing reconciliation efforts to the 2022 strategic planning session.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor McGrath. Is there any debate on the motion? There are two questions in there. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Butler, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm just happy to take the opportunity to speak in favor of the motion. Also, I'm very thankful and pleased with the work that was done and the collaborative effort of council to move this forward. So I'm fully in favor and pleased that we are dealing with this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I see no other hands. I will call the question. All those in favor? Perfect. Yes, thanks. I see them all. There are none opposed. That motion is carried. And I want to join the other councillors who have spoken. This is an historic event. By approving the land acknowledgement policy, council has signaled a commitment to embark on a path of reconciliation. I think it's a significant step on that journey. So it's deserving to acknowledge those who have assisted council to arrive at this moment. Administration generally, and Ms. Riddell and the Inclusion Committee in particular, as has been noted. Thank you all very much. Also, though, instrumental in initiating the discussion at the council level and an engaged and ardent advocate at this table within the Inclusion Committee and within the community generally has been Councillor Jenna McGrath. And so to help mark this special occasion and in keeping with the recommendation in the approved policy, I would like now to invite Councillor McGrath, who made the motion, to deliver our inaugural land acknowledgement.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. I feel an extreme amount of honor and privilege to have this opportunity to provide us, the municipality of Jasper, with its first and inaugural land acknowledgement. Firstly, I invite you to take a deep breath in and out. Let your body start to relax. And if it feels safe for you, perhaps closing your eyes might feel right. Feel free to place a hand to your heart. Feel free to root your feet into the earth or the floor. Take another deep breath in and take a deep breath out. Jasper National Park and the municipality of Jasper are on Treaty 6 and 8 territories, as well as Métis Region 4. This land is the traditional territory, meeting ground, gathering place, traveling route, and home for the Zane, Nihiawak, Anishinaabe, Secwepemc, Stoney Nakoda, and Métis. The municipality of Jasper acknowledges the land and these territories. To honor the relationship Indigenous peoples have with this land, to remind us of our responsibility and obligations to this place and to Indigenous peoples, and to affirm our accountability to address the ongoing impacts of colonization that continue to affect Indigenous peoples. Take a deep breath in and let it go. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor McGrath, very much appreciated. Council, with that, I invite us to turn to agenda item 7.2, community garden expansion. Mr. Given, again, in your court.
Sure. Thanks, Your Worship. Again, Mr. Greathead, our Director of Operations, is here and if needed can answer any questions. But again, Council has seen this at the committee level and is aware of the request. Earlier this year, Council was approached with a request to expand the community garden on Connaught Drive or to examine an opportunity for alternate sites in other places across the municipality. Mr. Greathead and the operations team engaged with the group to identify any potential barriers or opportunities. Administration is pleased to be able to recommend in consultation with the Jasper Local Food Society opportunity for an expansion of the existing community garden towards the east as shown in the diagram. This is not in conflict with any of the utilities that are in that location. And on council's direction, this is something that administration would work with the group to enable for the 2022 season.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Are there any questions of Mr. Given or administration generally with respect to the request for decision? Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. No questions for administration, just wanting to pass on to both administration and the community how pleased the community garden members are and the local food society members are to have seen this moved to our regular meeting today. They are very, very pleased, and an expansion is exactly what the local food society and the initiatives for food sustainability require. So thank you very much for the work on this summer and for collaborating with the community garden members to see this expansion request here today.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Keller-Harampe.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I had the pleasure of visiting the community garden last Saturday, and they had an apple press there, and they were producing apple juice for members of the community. And I want to thank them. They gave me a tour of where the expansion is going to be, and I found it very exciting for our community. And I would be happy to make that motion, if I was allowed to, that the council approve the expansion of the community garden to allow for additional garden plots and a shed as presented within the report.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Keller-Harampe. Is there any debate on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you all, and through you, Mr. Given, to all of administration, and I know operations in particular were engaged in this. So thank you for all the work on behalf of the community and the community garden group. That takes us to agenda item 7.3, COVID relief, property tax penalty rebate. Mr. Given again.
Sure. Thanks very much, Your Worship and Council. I'll start first just by acknowledging that you would have seen there is a difference in the report that's here at committee today, or the sheet that's here at committee today, when compared with the report that was at committee earlier on. And that's a reflection that the committee chose to take a different direction in its recommendation to council, which of course is fully within council and committee's right. But it made the recommendation, as it were, inconsistent with the report. And so this is a essentially cover sheet for the committee's recommendation, and I'm happy to discuss any of the details that were contained in the committee report, although they're not provided here, because again, we just didn't want to have that inconsistency or incongruity between the committee recommendation and the administrative report, which did not have the same recommendation. But at a high level, the municipality collects property taxes, and every year there's a property tax payment deadline. For taxes that are not paid at the deadline, the municipality assesses penalties to the property tax bill, which the owner is then required to pay. The municipality does, under the Municipal Government Act, have the authority to cancel, reduce, refund, or defer taxes and penalties. And council, in consideration of the economic conditions, wanted to have a discussion about the waiver of property tax penalties for the 2021 year. And so at the committee level, the committee made the recommendation that council approve waiving penalties on past due property taxes for the period of July 16th to September 30th, 2021. For council's information and for the community, the amount owing at July 16th, 2021 was approximately $1.8 million, which was up from the 2020 year and was also up from the 2019 year as a comparison. So 2019, the amount past due at that time was 1.2 million, In 2020, it was significantly less at just over $650,000. And again, for reference, 2021 was $1.8 million. At this time, at the time of writing the report, we're at approximately $278,000 of property taxes left outstanding, which represents approximately 2% of the total annual tax levy. But I provide that information for council. It is within your authority to waive these penalties if you see fit and equitable to do so. You'll see that this covering sheet has alternative recommendations that were contained in the administrative report, and I'll leave it here for council discussion and debate and direction.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Questions for administration with respect to the report? Councillor Demota.
Just to refresh my memory, because I don't have the document in front of me, and I'm sorry that if I missed it while you were refreshing us, Mr. Given, but in the time between July 16th and September 30th, from what we've been able to calculate so far, have there been many penalties that might have been accrued in that time from outstanding debt? Or do we have an amount approximately for that period of time?
Your worship, to Councillor Demota, yes, the amount of penalties for the July 16th to September 30th period is approximately $78,000.
Oh,
so
right.
that's reflective of the penalties on that $1.8 million. And, as it declined, over those months, some people would have paid off their bills and wouldn't have any additional penalties accrued. But the total amount as calculated by Finance and Administration to September 30th that would be refunded would be or waived would be that $78,000, approximately $78,000.
I apologize for the repetition. I just wanted to be clear on that number. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Given, for the explanation. I have only one question about the report that is provided here, and that is under the heading Financial. It reads, the COVID relief reserve is flexible and may be used in any year. I would like to understand why that statement is there, in the sense that this is really not, as I understand, about the COVID relief fund. It is about, obviously, the deferral of or rebate of penalties. So could you explain that statement for me? Thank you.
Your worship, if I may, to Councillor Butler. Yes, Councillor Butler. So I think in part that's a bit of a reflection that administration was trying to figure out how to do a covering report and recommendation that was from committee. The committee came up with, and which is, again, as I said, fully within council's authority. So I think that this report is not as detailed as it could have been, and ultimately, the municipality does budget on an annual basis for some revenue from property tax penalties. It is sort of inconsequential about how council chooses to fund this direction. If we ended up the year in a net deficit for the overall municipal budget, then that net deficit could be covered by the COVID relief reserve. Or council could provide direction upfront that these amounts could be paid directly from the COVID relief reserve. But in the end, the net impact of either of those two directions ends up being the same. It is also possible that the municipality, if council waived these penalties, it is possible that the municipality could end the year in a surplus on a overall municipal budget-wide basis, and there would be no requirement to draw from the COVID relief reserve. So to be clear, the committee recommendation does not explicitly say that it should be paid from the COVID relief reserve. Administration acknowledges that a waiver of predicted revenue is not the same as funding something new, and in the end, the total results of the municipality will have to be reported to council, and any deficit is reported to council and to the public and would have to be made up through the use of reserves. And it's also possible the municipality doesn't end up in a deficit at the end of the year as a result of this action, and there's no need to use any reserves. But so, Councillor Butler, that was maybe a bit circular, but I think the point is administration acknowledges council is not asking, and certainly the recommendation is not framed in such a way that it directs use of the COVID relief reserve.
Thank you for that, Councillor Butler and Mr. Given. Councillor Juneau.
I just quickly went to the web and I couldn't find the minutes of last week's committee meeting, but I thought we had discussed the possibility or even made a recommendation to waiving penalty till the end of September. Does anybody recall that? Or anybody recall the discussion around that? Because it came about when I asked that the penalty of 3% per month be reduced. And then in the ensuing discussion is that, well, there would be no penalty till the end of September. So I was satisfied that there'd be a reduction in penalties for those who are in arrears. And I can't recall the discussion, and the minutes are not on the web yet. So clarify me, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Juneau. Go ahead, Mr. Given.
Yes, Your Worship, if I may. So two things for Councillor Journeau. The first, the minutes are not up on the web because they haven't been adopted by council yet, and they won't until we go through the regular process of the next committee meeting. And so after that, when council has formally adopted them, they would be posted to the web. But second, I guess the important thing here, the report under agenda item 7.3 does reflect the direction the committee gave administration, or sorry, the committee was recommending to council that council waive penalties on past due property taxes for the period of July 16th to September 30th. So that is exactly what the committee directed, and that's exactly what agenda item 7.3 says.
Thank you. Sorry for the misunderstanding.
Thank you, Councillor Trudeau. Councillor Demota.
Thank you. I just, I thought we had quite a bit of debate on this, and I do apologize if you see my hand go up. I had a Zoom update today, and now there's this, when my hand goes up, it auto fills in and it tells me I'm about to raise my hand and the little gold hand goes up, even though I didn't select gold. I think that we've had quite a bit of conversation on this, and you know, I think in being consistent with what we did last year during the pandemic, we should extend it to September 30th. So I'm in favor of our committee's recommendation. And just because we decide on this motion today won't leave the next council out to discussing on whether they want to you know, look at using some of the reserve for other penalties that might accrue from October 1st to December 31st. So there is an option there. So we're not completely excluding that going forward if, you know, issues arise, or, you know, the next council feels that, you know, it's just to do so or the right thing. So I'm prepared to move if the rest of council's ready and doesn't have any more questions on this. Okay. Okay. Sorry, sir. You're in charge.
I will just formally canvass if there are further questions. If not, I will invite you to make the motion. I see no other hands up with respect to questions. So go ahead, Councillor Demota.
Okay. I move that council approve waiving penalties on past due property taxes for the period of July 16th to September 30th, 2021.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. I will open the motion to debate. Don't see anything. Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you. Last week I spoke against this. I think I voted against it, but I have had a change of heart. I think the only reason I did vote against it was because we kind of post-dated it. So I felt that we as council, if we were going to waive taxes, you know, it would have been to keep it equitable amongst everyone. I would have hoped that we would have proposed this in earlier in the season, whereas people who did pay their taxes in time with the impression that they would be avoiding penalties, would have also had the option to hold on to those monies throughout the summer for operations. And I think people fought hard to get those taxes paid, and they may have been able to use that money for other purposes throughout the summer. Although in retrospect, I do feel that I support waiving the penalties between the period of July 16th and September 30th. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I see no other hands. I will just speak briefly. Oh, I'm sorry, I see Councillor Butler's hand. Go ahead. And
Sorry, I certainly could have waited. I want to speak in favor of the motion. I also appreciate Councillor Wilson's point, and I do appreciate him coming around to support of this. I absolutely agree that the part of this that I'm uncomfortable with is that we're doing it retroactively. However, I think doing it retroactively is better than not doing it. And we did bring this up in June, and I believe with the expectation that we would be able to act exactly in the way that Councillor Wilson would have preferred, so that people know what to expect. But having said that, it's better to do it later than to not do it. So I agree with that point, and nonetheless, still, as Councillor Wilson said, I still think it is the best way to move forward. So thank you, and I am in favor of this.
thank you for that, Councillor Butler, and I echo those remarks. That was going to be my position as well. Had it been in front of us in May or June, I have no doubt that I at least would have voted in favor of deferring taxes, which would have resulted in the same waiver of penalties. We are late now to the game, but if it was right then, it's right now, and I'm in favor of the motion. If there is no further debate, I will then call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. That takes us to speed limits. Perhaps now we'll put the brakes on the motion we've been making so far today. Mr. Gibbon, you had your hand up first.
Well, really just to introduce the report again, you'll see that the report or the document in front of you, I'm not sure that I would call it a report, is reflective of the committee recommendation. There was no administrative report that initiated this. This was initiated from a council request at the committee level. Just making it here forward to formal regular council meeting for ultimate approval. But the committee recommendation from committee is that council approve a reduction in the speed limits from 50 kilometers an hour to 30 kilometers an hour on Collin Crescent, Aspen Avenue, Aspen Crescent, Balsam Avenue, and Patricia Street north of Pyramid Lake Road to Bonhomme Street. From an administrative perspective, this is certainly something that administration can enable if it was approved by council, and there would be some minimal cost with respect to signage, but it would not be material to the municipal budget. This is here for council consideration of the committee recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Perhaps a bit out of order. I'm going to ask first Councillor Butler. I saw your hand, Councillor Demota, but Councillor Butler indicated that when we were approving the agenda that there appeared to be a bit of a deficiency in the recommendation, having missed something that was discussed at Committee of the Whole last week. So I would invite Councillor Butler to refresh us all on that matter.
Sure, thanks, Mayor Ireland. I actually went back. I was a little surprised to see 1 and not 2 recommendations, because I thought we had advanced 2 recommendations forward to the meeting, and went back and reviewed that section of the meeting and discovered that indeed that was the case. So there were 2 committee recommendations. The one is correctly recorded. The second one was that committee recommend council direct administration to revisit speed limits in the community to 30 kilometers per hour unless otherwise posted, and that administration return with suggestions for exceptions to 30 kilometers per hour and support exemptions with reasons. And that was the second motion made by Councillor Wilson. And I think it's quite important that both of them be there. because I see that it is possible that councillors would support both, but it is also entirely reasonable to view them as alternatives, which is how I view them. So I believe that that second motion should also be under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Butler. And again, Councillor Demota, I see your hand, but I think that Mr. Given probably has a response to the point raised by Councillor Butler. So I will give him that opportunity, then turn to you, and then Councillor Journeau. Mr. Given, please.
Sure. Thanks very much, Your Worship. And, with apologies to council, administration did have a look at this. And that second motion was not lost. It is actually reflected on our outstanding, our motion action list, because our interpretation was that it was an additional direction to administration to bring back a report. So when we looked at the motions from the committee, we interpreted it, maybe incorrectly, but interpreted it as committee giving administration additional direction by motion for a report that the committee would like to see written. We did not interpret it as alternatives. We saw it as, which might have been incorrect. The motion, you're right, did say committee recommend council direct administration. But in our process that we've been going through for the latter part of this term, committee does have the authority to direct administration to do work to bring forward reports if committee makes a motion. So that's how we interpret it. If we interpreted it incorrectly, that would be my error. And if committee wished to consider that motion here, if council wished to consider that additional motion, you could. But I can tell you that administration has already accepted that direction from committee and will bring that forward in a report in the new council term.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Councillor Demota.
Well, I chaired the committee, and I vaguely recall that, and I was going to ask upon Councillor Wilson to clarify. I felt the intention was to bring that back at a future committee of the whole, understanding the timelines that we have on this term and the expectations for administration to get that compilation done up in time was a little bit too extraneous of an ask. So I didn't think it was right to ask that of administration. And I think that going forward, that could be brought up in the future at any council level, but not at this term.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Councillor Journeau, and then Councillor Wilson.
I'm sorry, I don't have anything on this item, but I want to speak on the last item. I completely missed it when I first read it, and I apologize for my question on the last item. Not sure where I was at when I first read it. My apologies for that. So, and I don't have any comment on this subject. So I really.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. Councillor Wilson.
Well, I'd just like to thank Councillor Butler for bringing up the topic. Although I was in the understanding that we're not going to have that conversation this term. I think conversation on it's a wholesome conversation. It's broad. I think we do expect administration to bring us back a report and some suggestions, and I just don't feel that we can fit it into this term. And I'll speak to the motion that we the motion that we do have in front of us is that I fully recognize that it's a token motion. I put it forward purposely to show progress. Of course, all of this could be encapsulated in a larger conversation. Yet we've had those, and we will have those in the future, or future council will have those. And yeah, I put it forward. I recognize that it's a token motion. It highlights only a few streets, although it knocks a few streets off the list, and it locks them off immediately. So thank you for that, and I look forward to having a larger, more wholesome conversation the coming months.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. I just want to, though, correct any misapprehension. There is not yet a motion before council now. We are discussing the topic, but we are still at the stage of asking questions of administration if councillors choose, and we're not yet to having a motion before us. Councillor Demota.
Well, I want to say that, you know, I've personally been given a little bit of feedback from the community. I went out and canvassed some people in some of those areas and got some feedback, and some of it I'll speak to in the debate portion. However, you know, we were accused of maybe doing a little bit of campaign grandstanding here, and why so little so late, you know, when we talked about this a long time ago. And, you know, I understand why it's coming here, and I think it's important. I mean, it was raised in a different area, but I think at the same time, we've done extensive consultation on this. We've had a study and a report, and it was advised at one time that when I was on the traffic advisory committee that tighter streets with parking allowed on both sides of the street with higher speed limits puts our community members in those areas at higher risk. So I think, you know, looking at all the streets that we have in front of us today with the recommendations and the consultation that we've had in the past, I think it's the right thing to do at this time. Is it great for the community as a whole? No, and I think taking that wholesome approach that Councillor Wilson had prescribed earlier is the right way to do it. But I mean, what are the costs here? You know, they're not extensive fiscally, and you know, it's the right thing to do overall. So I'm going to be in favor of going forward this for those particular reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. I have a question for administration, and it relates to some of the comments just made by Councillor Demota, and in particular, it is the question of formalized feedback. One of the issues we discussed a week ago was the short notice and the abbreviated opportunity for citizens in the community to become engaged in a decision of this nature to be made at council. So my question for administration is, have we, through our regular channels, received any feedback at all with respect to the issue of lowering speed limits generally, or in particular with these 5 designated streets?
No, Your Worship, not that I'm aware of, and I did have a very brief check-in with Ms. Nadan, who would obviously see any of that as it comes through any of our other regular channels. We have not received any feedback either direction on this issue at this time.
Thank you for that. Councillor Keller-Rampe.
I have to admit, I'm really torn on this. I understand the safety of our streets. And one of the streets I live is on here, and I happened to be around this weekend. I ran into some of my neighbors. It was really interesting. I ran into 5 and I posed the same question. 2 told me put it down to 40. 2 told me go with 30. 1 told me say the same. So we've had no letters from anybody on any of these streets requesting it. So I'm wondering, do we need more feedback from our citizens? When we put down Cabin Creek, we had a number of letters that came to council asking for that. People on my street were not even aware that this was on front of council. So I'm wondering, is it critical that we make this decision today? Or do we look at this in a big picture for the overall community for the upcoming council to look at? As I said, I'm really torn. I agree Colin Crescent, but I'll be honest, I think you can go down there at 10 kilometers an hour. I can't see anybody driving down there at 50 kilometers an hour. So I'm wondering, are we rushing this to make a point? Or should we be waiting to see what our community wants? Should we be consulting with them? As I said, I'm really torn on this subject.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Rampe. Councillor Demota.
I don't I don't really want to enter into debate before the motion's on there, but maybe just from my standpoint and just some history and maybe providing some clarity. And I can be completely wrong, but we did pay quite a bit of money to have a transportation study done for the community. And some of those recommendations talked about lowering speed limits, in particular the areas that I spoke to earlier. So within that study, there was extensive public consultation. We had a lot of working groups and committee gatherings to discuss different things in the community as far as the transportation master plan goes. And some of that included conversations on lowering speed limits to make our community safer. So I don't feel like we're rushing it. I've been arguing about this for 10 years. So I have to commend Councillor Wilson for making it relevant. And again, it does seem a little bit rushed now because of, the time on the term, but we've gone through extensive discussions on it. And, I have some reasons why I don't want to do it. I'll discuss that later, but I think it's the right thing to do because it's going to be better for the community as a whole. Hopefully this trickles into something bigger, and that's why I'm in favor of it. Again, sorry, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Boda. Councillor Wilson.
Just to get the motion on the table, because I think seems as if we've almost entered into debate over it. I'll put it forward. I make the motion that council approve a reduction in speed limits from 50 kilometers an hour to 30 kilometers an hour on Collin Crescent, Aspen Avenue, Aspen Crescent, Balsam Avenue, and Patricia Street, north of Pyramid Lake Road to Benham Street.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for the motion. Do you wish to open debate?
Yeah, I think I'll just add that I'm really pushing this motion as a symbol of ways we can get things done. I think we can get things done on council no, we're always a team. Sorry, I was deliberating that word, but no, we can get things done through wholesome, wholehearted, broad, sweeping discussion. But sometimes we have to pick away at it, and sometimes, well, that time is now. In my opinion, I just like to. I think as we reduce speed limits along Benham, I made the comment that if residents out there feel that the speed limits on their streets don't represent the speed that should be driven, and it's at risk to the residents, that they could speak out. And so I grabbed onto this one, and I think it's a pretty straightforward motion. I know, of course, it's picking away at a larger topic, yet sometimes you can do that and see results.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilson. The motion is on the floor and open to debate. Councillor Demoda.
Okay, in some of my conversations, people on some of those streets have said that they don't feel that 30 will do anything, or any speed limit marker. But at the same time, it's good to start the conversation in that direction. There was quite a bit of thought put towards the intersection at Balsam and Geeky. Almost every conversation I had, regardless of where the people lived in those areas, said that the Geeky Street between the Legion and Bonham is a drag strip, or has become a drag strip, and maybe putting a four-way stop sign at Balsam will slow things down, and we should look at reducing the speed limits on that street going forward as well. And so I wanted to bring that to point for administration's consideration going forward with a holistic approach. And as much as I think that we do need some more public engagement on this, I strongly believe that, you know, there's politics within politics here, and a lot of our decisions in the past that may appear to be divisive, I think people tended to be a little ground too much into sticking to some of the things that might be holding them back. And there's a few things that are holding me back on this one, but I realize that at the same time, and this could be a learning lesson for future councillors, that, you know, sometimes you got to give a little to support your other councillors when you know it's right for the community. And then, you know, sometimes down the road, you know, you can encourage them to say, hey, you know, I supported you on this, and you know, this is really good for the community. And regardless of what the policies and procedures may be, sometimes if you're not too stuck on those, you can help things move along a little bit quicker when you're willing to collaborate. And I really appreciate seeing some of that already today, and in this motion particularly as well. So thank you for bringing it forward, Councillor Wilson, and I look forward to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor DeVota. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. I do agree with this motion, and I do agree with increasing safety in our community. We have had the topic of speed limits before us for quite some time, so we did have quite an opportunity over this term to learn what we needed to learn, the differentiating factors between safety at 30 kilometers an hour and 40 kilometers an hour. We were presented the statistics as well as all of the work that had been accomplished, as Councillor Demota had spoken of the Traffic Advisory Committee did, and the Transportation Master Plan. Christina Dawn has noted on our chat that the motion will still come forward to the future council to revisit speed limits as a whole from the motion that was presented last week by Councillor Wilson. So I'm happy to see that in the future, it will be considered as a more holistic umbrella approach to the entire community. And in way of supporting Councillor Wilson today, and in way of supporting community safety in general, I believe that the right thing to do is to vote in favor of this motion today.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Further debate? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson, thank you very much for bringing this forward last week. I, as I've said, am in favor of moving speed limits down. And I believe that, as was mentioned many times last week, that speed limits throughout most of town should probably be 30. I'm just so disappointed with the way we're doing this. I am so disappointed that the alternative motion didn't come here today. I do not blame administration for that. I understand. Had we don't see the motion action list at these meetings, otherwise I would have realized that that's how it's been handled. But the motion was to recommend to council. So I believe we all left that meeting with the understanding that we would see a couple of alternatives here. Everyone who is speaking in favor of this motion really is acknowledging that in the end, this is not the right way to do this. This is getting into the weeds. This is piecemeal. This is going piece by piece. Councillor Demota pointed out that now we have Geeky, a section of Geeky sitting there not addressed right in the middle of the piece that we're addressing here. Others have said that 30 makes no sense itself on one of those streets. That's also true. Everyone has acknowledged that we've received no feedback. This is piecemeal work at an operational level. We could have accomplished this in the broad manner that Councillor Wilson suggested we can't when we talked about this in 2019. But Councillor Wilson moved to rescind the motion that we had on the table to make the community 30. So we dropped the issue. Maybe we would have dealt with it. And yes, COVID got in the way. And I understand that. We all recognize that for a year and a half, we had other things to talk about, but it still doesn't mean that we should work in this very piecemeal, in the weeds fashion. What are we going to tell those residents that Councillor Keller, our MP, talked to, who aren't in favor of this? We know so little about what residents feel about this. Councillors are individually trying to engage in their own public engagement process. Councillor Wilson himself said that he suggested to the community that for their areas of the community that they would like addressed, that they should speak up, and no one has. I honestly just don't know why we're here. And I was very much in favor that we recommend that administration revisit speed limits throughout the residential areas of town, bring it back, and in some kind of a coordinated and consolidated fashion, we easily could address this instead of this piecemeal one-off. So we're all here in agreement that we should address speed limits throughout the community. We're all, honestly, I've heard even those who are saying they're going to vote in favor of it saying, well, this isn't really the best way to do this, but we're going to do it. When we had a better motion that would have done this and more. So I regret that I can't vote in favor of this, even though I'm in favor of lowering speed limits, but this is not the way we're doing it. There seems to be a suggestion, and I find it very hard to hear, that part of the reasoning here is some sort of political games playing, that, oh, well, I'll support you on this, and maybe you'll support me on something else. Is that where we're at? I can't support this way of working.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor DeMota, I saw a pen up. You had a point of order?
Well, more so a point of order, or to help with some clarity on this. And there is another motion that was put forward by Councillor Wilson. And the motion was that committee recommend committee to council direct administration to return to a future committee of the whole meeting and revisit speed limits in the community with a focus on reducing speed limits to 30 kilometers an hour unless otherwise posted. This report should contain examples of streets that should be 50 kilometers an hour, including the reasons. So thank you, Ms. Nadal, for posting that in the chat, because we still have an opportunity here today as council, recommended by committee, to have administration come back to council with a report. So that, regardless of what gets done today, that could still be a motion, and we can deal with that today. And I completely understand, if I may just clarify my comments to which Councillor Butler was adhering to. I wasn't really saying like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. The thing is, what I was trying to do is basically exactly what's happening now. And the reason why we don't have a speed limit forward, because of these debates that we had in the past. And it wasn't just Councillor Wilson. I was part of it, and Councillor Butler, you were part of it, introducing 40-kilometer zones and all this stuff that really added too much to the conversation, and we got too buried into some of the little things that kept us from going forward. And I think it's happening again. And this is why I'm in favor of moving this forward, because it's going to spark a movement. I hope it sparks a movement, because it will make the community a better place for people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeMota. I want to raise a bit of a procedural opportunity as I speak in favor generally of the motion. And I recognize that while it is not the best way to approach this question, when we attempted a better way, which was a more holistic approach to speed limits in the community over the last couple of years, we stalled. And so, yes, this is not the best approach, but it might be better than doing nothing. And sometimes smaller steps in the right direction are preferable to large steps in opposite directions. So I'm inclined to support the motion, but procedurally, given what has been discussed about the other recommendation made by committee a week ago, and as it was made by Councillor Wilson, with a friendly amendment, we could have Councillor Wilson amend his current motion that council approve a reduction in those specific areas, and that council direct administration to come back with a more wholesome review overall and combine it in one. And that would that would recognize we're taking small steps, but recognizing that the larger step needs to be taken. However, if that happens, it is open to division because they are different issues. And I recognize that one councillor has already indicated that they might support one, but not necessarily the other. So I leave that procedural opportunity out there. It's not my motion, but it might be a way to proceed. But in any event, I will say that if this is a standalone motion, I would welcome a secondary motion to solidify the recommendation from committee a week ago that council direct and formalize that council does indeed make that direction or have the opportunity to make that formalization. But that is where I am at, speaking in favor of the motion, but suggesting some potential procedural opportunities to advance both issues. Councillor Butler.
Well, thank you for the suggestion. Having said what I did, somewhat perhaps over passionately, I agree, but the way we navigate through decision making is so important to me. But an amendment adding that recommendation, that direction to administration, so I would at least have the comfort that we would not be doing this and this alone, would allow me to vote in favor of the motion. And if Councillor Wilson was amenable to that amendment, and the wording would be something similar to the motion, the other motion that was read, putting it together, then no, I would not ask for a division. In fact, it would give me the comfort to move ahead and vote in favor. So I mentioned that for Councillor Wilson's consideration. If that could be a friendly amendment, which I think is fair, then I think we'd be close enough that I'd be in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, it's more than fair. I think it moves the issue further along the trail, and yeah, I definitely accept that. You know, I welcome it because it moves us further, and that's all I'm trying to get to. And if there's an additional step that we're making today, let's do it. Thank you.
Well, thank you both, Councillor Butler and Councillor Wilson. So you have accepted that as a friendly amendment, Councillor Wilson. And so for administration, I've lost eye contact with anybody, but I think then the motion would be as it was presented. And then it would be an and just drop the committee recommends. It would be and council direct and whatever the wording of the previous motion would be. So that is the motion now before council. As it has been amended, I would invite any further debate if that is necessary, but otherwise I would call the question and it will encompass both of those recommendations. I see no other hands up. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Councillor Demota.
I just wanted to say that good job on the collaboration. I wish we would have done this 2 years ago, but we had a lot of learning lessons and we took some progressive steps today. So bravo.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. That takes us to agenda item 7.5, the 2021 Dark Sky Festival outdoor venue fees. Mr. Gibbon.
Yes, Your Worship. Again, just a brief introduction. At last week's Committee of the Whole meeting, Council received a letter from Tourism Jasper with a request to waive fees for the Dark Sky Festival, specifically fees related to outdoor events where there is no charge for the event. And so I just wanted to make that point in there. The amount reflected in the committee recommendation is, I believe, reflective of the total request. There will still be some fees associated with if council approves this motion, there would still be some fees associated with the use of the multi-purpose hall, which I don't believe Tourism Jasper is asking to have waived, as there is a entry fee charged for those events that are held indoors. So the committee last week made the recommendation that council waive the $9,000 in fees associated with outdoor rentals by Tourism Jasper for the 2021 Dark Sky Festival.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any questions for administration? If not, is there a councillor prepared to make a recommendation? Councillor Keller-Harempy?
I make a recommendation that council waive the 9,000 fees associated with the outdoor rental by Tourism Jasper for the 2021 Dark Sky Festival.
Thank you,
I think this
Councillor
is great.
Keller.
I think this is a great event for our community. There's a lot of free events, and our community can come out and enjoy, and our visitors. I think this is a great way of the municipality supporting local businesses and our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Harempy. Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and thank you, Councillor Keller-Harempy, for the motion that you brought forward. I would just like to repeat what was said last week on the agreement that I have with the writer of the letter, Mr. Jackson, for the value and the positive impact to the community in the sake of well-being for all residents and visitors alike, for these events and installations to take place in the municipality of Jasper, and the desperate need for an opportunity of reprieve given all that we have all been through. So I'm really excited to see the Dark Sky Festival happening in, must be 11 days it starts, or 10 days that it starts. And I look forward to joining the events and taking an opportunity to relax and to really enjoy the night sky that Jasper is so fortunate to have.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Councillor Demoda?
Well, you know what, this one was a really easy one for me. You know, this is just honoring a partnership that's evolving and growing. And, you know, Tourism Jasper's done a lot for the community, not only with programming events and attracting people to our community, but with some of our infrastructure and enhancing our community. So to me, this is a little bit of a give back, and it's small and definitely worthwhile for the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demoda. Councillor Butler?
Thank you very much. I just would suggest that we remove the figure $9,000 from the motion. That isn't actually what was asked for in the letter, and the $9,000 was an approximate amount that was suggested was being charged for all of the facilities, including multi-purpose hall, where entry fees are being charged and where the letter suggests that they're happy to pay fees. What was actually asked for was just to not charge the fees associated with outdoor rentals. So I would suggest that we just remove that number. That's up to administration to sort out, and I believe conforms to the intent. So that would be a suggestion to amend the motion accordingly. Otherwise, I'm in favor. I would point out that I think it's difficult to have to work so quickly on this, and I would love to consider what our policy is. Perhaps we need to have policy that determines how we determine charges for these facilities, and whether, if the use is a community-based use and there are no fees being charged, then maybe we shouldn't be charging fees, or maybe we should at least have that conversation in future. So a request for a refund of fees, which really should be administrative, doesn't end up having to come to council. Obviously, we're not going to do that today, but it's worth pointing out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. In terms of the wording of the motion, I too was about to suggest as a friendly amendment that the amount be stricken, and otherwise I am in favor, but also to pick up on Councillor Butler's comments, and I think we discussed this in the course of our discussions and debate over financial controls. It seems to me that with policy, this is something that could rest with administration rather than coming to council as it has. Not that I mind dealing with it, but there might be better ways to address these. But in any event, Councillor Butler is right. The request was to waive fees for outdoor rentals. And if the motion is so limited, I think it captures that. And whether that fee is $8,700 or $9,200 no longer matters. Council has indicated that the fees associated with outdoor rentals should be waived in this case. And I would support that if Councillor Kelleher MP will accept that as a friendly amendment.
I accept that as a friendly amendment. Thank you.
Thank you all. If there is no further debate, I will call the question, and the motion is subject to the friendly amendment, so it is without the actual dollar figure in it. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. I think that takes us to agenda item 8. Bylaw summary is just for information. Agenda item 9, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. There is nothing before us and nothing that has come forward, so thank you for that. Agenda item 10, other new business. Is there any other new business for council? This will be the last of our business then. Councillor Butler. Sorry, Councillor Butler, you are muted.
Still muted.
Looks good now.
I'm so tired of Zoom. Thank you. It's hardly new business. I've said that 3 times now, twice to myself. But I was just thinking back to the conversation about speed limits and that one motion being placed on the motion action list. And it occurs to me that maybe there's reason to put the motion action list onto every agenda, including committee of the whole agendas. It wouldn't need to be considered. I absolutely agree with the process that Mr. Given has suggested, where at regular meetings, we make formal adjustments to it. But just sort of as information, I don't think it would be any more work just to pop it in at the end of also committee meetings, because it really is such an excellent way of tracking the business as we do it. And even though we don't, pass formal motions at committee, we are still dealing with the items on the motion action list. So it's just a suggestion for future at the discretion of administration to consider, and I don't think it involves any more work. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Butler, any other new business for discussion? Councillor reports. Seeing nothing, I will say, and I'm sorry, I'm just checking the dates, but recently, Friday of last week, October 1st, council was invited to a meeting with the NDP MLA, Darren Billius. I think 4 of us attended, just an hour-long discussion with him to put context to Jasper issues that he can carry forward to his role as an MLA generally in the province. Seemed to be a productive meeting with him, and it is always advantageous to take those opportunities to spread the word about our challenges here so that others are at least aware, and where they can, they may be able to offer assistance and become allies as we continue with a number of issues, both at the provincial and the federal level. So it was a productive discussion that we had with MLA Darren Billius. Any other reports? Councillor McGrath.
One report that tomorrow I will be attending both the community conversation and a library board meeting locally. And yesterday I attended a Yellowhead Regional Library meeting.
Thank you for that. Any other reports? I think I might be seeing your hand, Councillor Kelleher MP, or at least a shadow of it. No? All right, thank you. All right, if there are no other council reports, then agenda item 12, there is a list of upcoming events. Are there any events upcoming not on the list to which council's attention should be drawn? I see nothing. And then we added an agenda item. I'm sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, just to make a bit of a joke, should we optimistically add the community municipality Christmas party on there, and you know, fingers crossed, here's open.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it off for now.
All right, thank you for that. We did add to the agenda item 12A, an in-camera session as suggested by Councillor Journeau. In a moment, I will invite you, Councillor Journeau, to make a motion that we move in camera. I will say to any members of the public who are watching, when we come out from an in-camera meeting of that nature, there will be no further public business to be discussed. We are going in camera to discuss CAO performance, which is an in-camera item. And when we come out, it will be for adjournment only. So I thank you for your attendance up until this point of time. And I will then invite Councillor Journeau to make a motion that we move in camera at 10:46 a.m.
I'll make that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And I think I just briefly saw a flash of a message from Mr. Gibbon that he has or will email another link for councillors to log in for an in-camera session. So I will bid adieu and join you all again very soon as I find that new link. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
How long is our break?
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.